This is John Jackson Miller. I am the founder and curator of Comichron.com, and this is the comic sales report for April 2018. We finally have the estimates for comics that were shipped by Diamond Comic Distributors. We were able to, make our own calculations based on information that Diamond sent out. And this is an interesting time to have this information released because, we got the preliminary material and the final numbers out from Diamond on either side of Free Comic Book Day here in 2018, and by all indications, it was another very successful event. Many retailers say it's their biggest day of the year. I, as a comics creator, had two different signings at different comic shops in Wisconsin. Both of them had patrons lined up outside the door before opening and around the block even. So it continues to be a very popular attraction. Now, again, this is an interesting month, partially because we are now 25 years exactly after the biggest month in the history of the comics market, which was 1993 April, when Adventures of Superman number 500 came out, and the other rebirth of Superman comics. Interestingly, it's another Superman title that is the top seller, Action Comics 1000. Now, we did not have the number in our preliminary report as to exactly how many copies did ship to North America. We do know now. It is 449,000, almost 450,000 copies that shipped to North American stores in the month. DC had announced the rounder number of 500,000 for their total number of copies out there. And indeed, if you were to take the copies that would have gone to Great Britain and other European countries that buy from Diamond, and also add some of the considerable reorders that shipped the first week of May, you would certainly get to the 500,000 mark there. So that is not a surprise. We do not include the British sales in the North American market traditionally because it is a commodity report. It is there to tell North American retailers how many copies of things are in their own market. It's something where if there was a UK report, we would release the UK report as well, but you wouldn't want to mix the two, in part because a number of comics aren't available in both markets, and it just gets complicated. The numbers for the month are pretty interesting. Beyond Action 1000, we've got three comic books, over 150,000 copies. Number 2 and number 3 this month are issues 798 and 799 of Amazing Spider-Man. Those three books, 1, 2, and 3 there, are also the top 3 comics of 2018 in general so far. Previous to now, we had Dark Knight's Metal number 6 as the top comic book for the year. That has fallen to 4th because of Action and the 2 Amazing Spider-Man issues. No doubt that in May, Amazing Spider-Man 800 will also take its place further up this list, possibly, I would suspect, in between number 1 and number 2 for the year. We also see that number 4 and number 5 this month were also above 100,000. There are actually 6 comics above 100,000 copies, which is really just sort of a psychological level in the market. It's been a long time since we've had 6 comics above 100,000 copies. And then one of the interesting things that we see as well is that we have had so far 7 comics come out that had sales over 150,000 copies. And that compares with 950,000 copy sellers in all of 2017. So the year is looking fairly good in comparison already to what was admittedly a lackluster year last year. Now, Action Comics 80 Years of Superman is the lead graphic novel, and of course, as noted in our preliminary report, graphic novels were positive this month. And there's another interesting thing in the numbers this month. It's that when you look back at the Diamond Top 300, going all the way back to 20 years before April 2018, we see that the number of copies represented by those top 300 books has been in the range between 6 and 7 million inclusive there for the all of the sort of benchmark years going back. 1 year before now, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We see that the numbers are in this sort of narrowly constrained range. And I think that is interesting in terms of, you know, people are frequently discussing the viability of the periodical comic book in the comics market. It looks from something like this that it's a relatively stable format. Trading in such a narrow range. One of the things that determines what comics sold this month is what they sold last month and the month before and the month before. There's a lot of momentum in the market that is just sort of built in, and that kind of stability that is there exists because we have people who have pull and hold folders at comic shops, people who have subscription boxes there. They tend to keep them over time, and so we have seen over the past 20 years that the number of comics sold is in a fairly narrow range. This is the April 2018 page on Comichron, which can be reached from the monthly sales tab that appears on every page on the site. And here we see the top 5 that we saw before, and we also see the table which has the columns units, dollars, issue price, on sale date, which is important because many of the comics that are coming out these days in the top 500 are ones that are reappearing after having been solicited many years ago in some cases. And then, of course, publisher and estimated units. And we can sort up and down by each of these categories as well as search. Now, what we see immediately is, of course, Action Comics at 450 and the other titles as mentioned. But what we can also do here is let's just look for first issues. And we'll have to skip down past the issues that have no issue number, and the sorting engine likes to think that those are ahead of the number ones. But we'll see that Hunt for Wolverine 1, as we mentioned, is the top-selling debut at 138,000. Venomized is our other comic that's above 100,000 copies this month. Domino #1 from Gail Simone. That's another title that's above, looks like 89,000. And then our first DC debut is Immortal Men #1 in 22nd place. And of course, we have some annuals in here. And a number of these $1 True Believers issues that Marvel puts out. An interesting debut we have here, one that has a lot of followers, is Sonic the Hedgehog. This is IDW's relaunch of a series that was quite long running at Archie Comics, and it has been on hiatus for a while. As IDW got ready to take over. We'll note that actually was a weekly release here this month, and ranges from 21,300 North American to over 13,000 for the fourth issue. And so, again, this is one of the reasons that it's helpful to have that on sale date. You can tell that, for example, this particular issue has had 3 more weeks of life than the most recent release, which is issue 4. What we can do as well is sort by dollars and see that, again, no surprise, Action 1000 is the top dollar book. Hunt for Wolverine actually leapfrogs over the second of the 2 Amazing Spider-Man issues because of its $6 value. Now, these values are not exactly just price times estimated units, and that is because the dollar rankings are based on invoice dollars, meaning that retailers have already taken their discounts. before Diamond actually calculates what the dollar rankings of the books are. And as far as which of these is the more important category, there are arguments for both. A higher unit ranking means more people are reading the book, but obviously a higher dollar ranking means the publisher's making more money from it. Over here on the left-hand side, we find a number of our vital statistics, including that this was a 4-week month. It was also a 4-week month in the previous April. We see that the top 300 comics account for 6.8 million copies, as we had mentioned earlier. If you go out to the top 500, those extra 200 books add about 410,000 copies, bringing us to 7.23 million. And then, once we get everything beyond 500, and this includes comics for which Diamond may only have sold one copy, because it's an older comic book with reorders, that only accounts for another 150,000 copies once we're out of the top 500. And again, just scrolling down here, interesting number. We are back to even for the year when it comes to comics dollar sales in the top 300. $100 million, a little over $100 million. That is what the top 300s in the first 4 months of 2017 did. The top comic not by Marvel or DC is Walking Dead number 178 from Image. We can go down to 25th place for the next Image book. That's Spawn 284. And Spawn is now one of the highest numbered books that got to its numbering honestly with no reboots or renumberings or anything like that out there. We do have a page that does track the legacy renumberings over the years, and how we got to issue 689, for example, on Avengers without actually having had a lot of the issues in between being part of that sequential numbering. Oblivion Song number 2 at 44,500 North America, and that's in 29th this month. Something else of note, it does look as though Action 1000, while it does boost the overall number of units that DC moved, that does seem to come to a degree at the expense of some of the other more regular titles that the publisher puts out, which are showing up at lower levels than they had been in the previous month. Now, this is not that unusual because retailers would be thinking that when they have a huge DC event, likely they're going to redirect dollars that would have been going to other DC titles. Sometimes everything goes up, but not always. The sense would be that when you don't have Action 1000 in the picture, or a large title like that, the general thing that would happen would be you'd see a bounce back in the following month. So we will take a look at that in the month of May. Moving to the 2018 so far page, as mentioned, Action and the 2 Amazing Spider-Man issues this month take the top 3 spots that were previously held by Dark Knight's Metal and Doomsday Clock. We'll see as well that a number of titles have moved up the list as they've gotten additional reorders, and this is a list that goes down only 100 places, although we do merge everything. All the 2,000 data points that we now have from January through April are all reflected in this, and we see at this point that the 100th place book moved 45,700 copies. We're going to expect that number to increase and increase as the year goes on and more titles begin loading into this chart. One thing that we're able to do is the market shares to date, merging everything that's happened in January through April. Now, this isn't just something where you can take the market shares for those 4 months and average them. This only works if you know what the overall dollar figure is each month, and then apply what Marvel got each month, DC got each month, etc., etc. And we see here Marvel, DC about 3.5 points apart. Image right at 10%, IDW right at 4%, Dark Horse at 2.5%. We are only able to do this particular chart out to about 14 or so publishers. The reason there is that Diamond does not release market shares for all its publishers each month. It just releases the top 20. And what we have here, these are the 14 publishers that have appeared in every single month's list, all of the top 20s for the first 4 months of the year. So that means that these numbers do hold up. They are correct. And that makes this sort of a larger catch-all than it would be, 5.7%. When we get to the end of year figures from Diamond, they'll probably go out to the top 20. Let's take a quick look at what we know so far about May. Now, this is going to be found on the monthly sales section of Comichron. It's there already because we're able to start these pages because we know something about reorders. So we've got May and June pages up already. May, what we know about it so far is that it will be 5 weeks versus 5 weeks. So that'll be an even comparison. We will also have another one of these very big, million copy. It looks like DC has sold of DC Nation Zero. That's a 25-cent book, and while that title will not make the top 300 or 500 because Diamond does not report the comics that are priced below $1. We will be able to see its effects in the unit sales for May. So no matter what happens, odds are that the unit sales for May will be up, just not necessarily among the comics that cost regular price. We'll see what happens then. The free comic book day comics don't get counted in that either. One of the big headlines for the month is we have Amazing Spider-Man 800, which is Dan Slott's final issue. Marvel in early April had announced that it had orders topping 300,000 copies already, given that $7.99 was around 233,000 copies. It could go still higher, and we will see where that winds up. We can see here already the advance reorder leaders from the individual weeks leading up to the month of May. Amazing Spider-Man has led those charts a couple of times. We also have got some of the Marvel Fresh Start books, Avengers 1, Venom 1, Black Panther 1. These have all led the charts that come out every week, and we report them on Comichron. And if you want to go and see any individual week's chart, you can just click through from this page. One of the things that we will note as well is that Amazing Spider-Man 800 is a May 30th book. So it's not going to have a lot of time for reorders. In fact, any time at all for reorders. It will probably have a lot of traffic in June, whereas Avengers 1 May 2 book is going to have significantly more time for reorders. Then I think finally of note is that it looks like the month of May is another skip month for Doomsday Clocks. So that is another thing which may be weighing on DC's numbers a little bit, that it does not have that high profile title coming out. We'll eventually have the reordered information for May coming onto this chart as May progresses. Diamond releases 2 sets of reorder charts, the advanced ones for just books that haven't come out yet, that the final order deadlines have passed on, and then they also release just the regular reorder charts which mean these are books that have come out, and we have gotten reorders from retailers on these things. That's the report for the month, and until next time, we'll see you in the comic shop.